Hi, my name is Jason Thibeault, the founder of Dime Novel Publishing and the author of Gertrude's Broken Wand, the first book in the upcoming Marmalade series. We thought it would be a great idea to do this live author reading to introduce readers to our brand new series and this first book. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read 3 chapters, and then afterwards we'll talk a little bit about the series. Here we go. This is the prologue. Gertrude took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and pointed her wand at the ground. "Farja," she said. She waited a second and then opened one eye, peering out across her long nose at the unchanged landscape around her. She gritted her teeth. "Palash," she said, this time pointing the wand at a tree. Nothing happened again. "Gripple," she yelled, feeling her anger boiling. Calm down, she thought. Getting angry isn't going to help. Need to focus. She took another deep breath and steadied herself. But her mind was blank. She couldn't think of any more names. The dark forest around her groaned in response, as if it too was frustrated by her efforts. It wasn't the first time that she had stood underneath the leafless branches of the haunted forest with her wand, trying to come up with a name for the land they lived in, just like the witch before her, and the witch before her, and as long back as Gertrude cared to imagine. She wondered if this was where it all started, when the land turned to a perpetual Halloween. It was a curse that had ruined travel, destroyed the countryside, and brought dark creatures into their lives. Gertrude looked around, wondering where they were lurking. Ghosts, ghouls, zombies, and worse. She looked back at the castle, shrouded in a perpetual gloom from the clouds above. A rustling in the trees caught her attention, and out of the corner of her eye she saw something moving. A zombie. The shambling corpse wandered aimlessly. "Ugh, zombies," she said. "Freak me out." With a quick snap of her wand and a few muttered words, the zombie's head popped off and the corpse fell to the ground. Gertrude shrugged. But it just punctuated the fact that time was running out. No one had been able to give the land a name. Gertrude slid the wand back into her braided gold rope belt and remembered the dream she had had for the past 2 weeks. A wide open field, lush green grass, leafy trees, and someone falling on top of her, breaking her wand. At first, she had been mortified by the dream, as she had dreaded the idea of asking Turkley to fix her wand again. The old goat hated her, and had sworn never to fix her wand again, especially not after what happened last time. But as the weeks wore on, the same dream waking her every night, she began to look at the brighter side. If someone breaks my wand, she had thought, perhaps I can get them to fix it, and they can be the kingdom's witch. She smiled even now, thinking about when she had come up with her plan. Although it was a short-lived smile, as she thought about her trip just that morning to the Royal Library to read the prophecy again. The scroll had been very clear. If the land wasn't named by sunset tonight, everything would disappear forever. The castle, the spooky trees, the zombies, even her. And although she didn't want to disappear, she was okay with the zombies going, she'd come to realize that she'd rather have her last day spent as not a witch than waste any more time trying to give the stupid land a name. "When it apparently doesn't like any of my suggestions," she mumbled. She looked back at the castle and then at the path that led in the direction she thought the clearing from her dream was. With her wand in her belt, certain she could take care of any of the other haunted forest's cursed inhabitants, she headed off to put her plan in motion. She kicked the trunk of a huge tree as she walked by, and the land shook once as if in reply. Gertrude, though, just kept on walking. So we're going to skip now to chapter 10. Rebecca and her brother Dylan actually have already found their way to this magical land that Gertrude was just in. And right now, Rebecca has a broken wand from Gertrude, and that's Gertrude's plan, is to have Rebecca fix her wand, and she's headed off to the castle to get it fixed. Rebecca stood at the threshold to the spooky forest for what must have been 30 minutes before finally working up the courage to step inside. The difference between the two forests was like night and day. When she stood underneath the big leafy boughs of the tree tunnel, she had a sense of warmth and comfort. Birds sang, insects chirped, and the sunlight bathed her face. When she stepped out from underneath the tree tunnel, all of that good stuff was gone, ruined. There was an oppressive silence in the spooky forest, almost like a blanket, that left her feeling suffocated as if she was underwater. "Ugh," she said. "Why didn't Gertrude tell me about this forest, or at least provide me a way around?" But the more she thought about it, looking left and then right, she realized that the way around was probably a long detour, and had the old witch said anything about the spooky forest, Rebecca might not have agreed to go. "Well, I need to get to Turkley if I have any chance of getting home," she said. Taking a deep breath and trying to think of what Dylan might say to her right now to give her courage. "Come on, you big baby, it's just a bunch of spooky trees." She smiled and plunged inside, continuing to follow the path that led to the castle just on the horizon. Rebecca tried to take her mind off the spookiness of the forest by imagining what the castle would be like. Sleeping Beauty, she wondered? Or maybe Cinderella? That would be awesome. Just like every other fourth grade girl, Rebecca loved the idea of being a princess in a castle. I wonder if the castle even has a princess, she thought. Maybe if they don't, they'll need one. She was still imagining what her horse would look like when a voice from behind stopped her in her tracks. "Hold it right there," it said. The voice sounded like a cross between a chainsaw and a lion. It was part growl and part raspy grumble. "Please," she said, "I'm just walking to the castle." Rebecca looked down at the bundle she held. Her only way home. "Well, you hand over your valuables, and I'll let you on your way," the voice said. Without thinking, Rebecca spun around, putting the handkerchief bundle behind her back. "But I'm not from here. I don't even have any valuable—" she started to say, when her own voice left her as she gazed upon the massive creature standing in the path. She stumbled backwards a couple of steps. "An ogre," she thought, her eyes wide. "Not from here," the ogre said, nodding. "Well, you sure dress funny." Just like she'd seen in countless fairy tales and in movies like Shrek, the ogre stood some 6 or 7 feet high, towering over her even from 20 feet away. His skin was a pale green, and he was dressed in a combination of leather and metal armor. His pants were tucked into huge boots with heavy iron toes. On his top, he wore a shirt of linked metal rings that flowed over his big belly and halfway down his arms, exposing his huge muscles. Hanging on a thick leather belt hung 2 swords and wicked knives. She didn't know how he could have been hiding in the scraggly trees or how she had missed him. He was huge! "But just because you dress funny doesn't mean you don't have anything valuable," he said, taking a step forward. One of his hands rested on the pommel of a large sword. He jingled as he walked. Rebecca didn't know what to say. She took another step back, and the ogre furrowed his brow. "You're not thinking of running, are you?" She stopped from taking another step back, trying hard to keep his gaze. It was tough, considering how monstrous he looked. 2 huge fangs overlapping his top lip, sinister yellow eyes, big, bushy eyebrows like monster caterpillars. Scars crisscrossed his cheeks and neck from countless battles. He had no hair, which made his pointed ears stand out even more. One thick gold ring hung from his right ear. "And if I say yes?" she asked half-heartedly. He grinned, revealing other pointed, chipped, and cracked teeth. "I'll give you points for bravery," he said. "But even with my armor on, I think I could catch you pretty easily. I mean, you didn't even see me hiding off to the side." Inside, the ogre was laughing. He knew that this was the girl Gertrude had been describing from her dream. He just needed to keep up the act. Of course, under normal circumstances, ogres didn't make promises to witches. But he owed Gertrude from a while back, and this seemed like an innocent enough way to pay back his debt. Escort the girl to the castle. But she didn't say I couldn't have a little fun first, he thought. He took a knife from his belt, one with a blade that looked longer than her arm, and began to pick at his yellowing, cracked fingernails. "And I'm not the worst thing in these woods," he said. "At least I'm robbing you and not trying to eat you." Rebecca began to fidget, like she did when her mom was unhappy with her. "But ogres gotta make a living," he said. "So, what are you holding behind your back?" Rebecca began to tremble, the tears welling in her eyes. "Please," she said, "I just want to get home. I just need to get to some shop called Turkley's something or other. I just need—" But he held up his hand. "Listen, I feel for you. But there hasn't been much travel between the castle and the lands outside. No one wants to go through this forest." He looked around. "Go figure," he said. He put the knife away, put his hands into his belt, and hitched up his pants. "So, behind your back, what is it?" "I'm never going to get home now," she thought as she began to cry. "Oh, I just wish Dylan were here." And for the first time since she landed on Gertrude, she wished for her mom as well. Staring at the ground, she slowly brought the bundled wand in front of her and held it out. "Is that?" she heard him say as he took 3 huge strides over to her and gently took it from her hands. She couldn't bring her eyes up to look at him as she heard him opening the handkerchief. "By the hammers of Duragar," he whispered. "It is!" Gertrude didn't say anything about getting her wand fixed, he thought. Suddenly, she felt a hand on her shoulders. Surprisingly, though, it wasn't rough or even heavy. There was gentleness about it. He knelt down, but even then was still taller than her. Taking his hand from her shoulders, he gently lifted up her chin with his finger. "Is Gertrude all right?" he asked. Rebecca nodded. He let out a sigh of relief. "Turkleys, that's what you said, isn't it?" he asked. "That makes perfect sense." She nodded again as he took one long last look at the wand and then wrapped it back up, placing it in her hands. Turkley hates Gertrude. No matter how important this wand is for the entire land, he'd never fix it for her. Stubborn old goat. Rebecca wiped the tears off her cheeks. "I give you even more points for coming into this forest with this wand," he said, suddenly looking around at the dark, spooky landscape. A silence hung on them, and Rebecca held the wand close to her. "If that wand were to fall into the wrong hands," he whispered, fingering his sword. "Okay, no time to lose." He stood up to his full 7 feet and bowed slightly. "I am Boardtux," he said. "It would be my pleasure to accompany you to Turkley's to get Gertrude's wand fixed. With me at your side, nothing else in this forest will bother you." This is chapter 18. Dylan has gone searching on his own for his sister. He ends up in the land in a totally different place. And he comes across these huge numbers of goblins who are partying, basically in the valley. They're singing and dancing around big fires, and they're having a great time. And he goes to investigate and ends up sliding down the canyon to this big throne area. And that's where we are now. Dylan rolled off the steep slope and onto the platform, his momentum carrying him to the throne. "Get away from that throne!" the little creature yelled. Dylan could see that he was carrying a huge book, open to a page in the middle. He had a long hooked nose and pointy ears that reminded Dylan of pictures he'd seen of creatures called gremlins. Angry, it had bared its teeth. Sharp, pointy teeth, and even though it was squinting, Dylan could see that it had brown eyes with bright yellow irises. He picked himself up, his hands burning from the descent, and grabbed the sword that lay by the throne. "If I'm going to die," he thought, "I'm not going without a fight." "How dare you," the creature started to say when some light of recognition crossed his face. "It can't be." He looked down at his book, flipping through the pages. Dylan held the sword in front of him. The pommel was white, although now smeared with blood from the cuts on his hands. The blade was 2 feet long and thick as his arm. It gleamed wickedly in the light of the tall bonfires. "Stay back," Dylan said as he cut through the air with the sword. He swung it too hard, and it carried past him, twisting him around. He quickly gathered himself and held it in both hands in front of him, pointed towards the creature. The creature, though, was busy looking down at his book, and then at Dylan as if comparing something. Can you put on the crown?" it asked. Dylan was incredulous. "What?" "The crown, right there," it said, pointing to Dylan's feet. "Can you put that on your head?" Dylan looked down at the crown and fought the urge to vomit. It was made of bones as well, with a tiny little skull at the front and small wings on the side. "Will my head fly off?" Dylan asked as he looked at the delicate skeletal wings. The creature emphatically shook his head. Shrugging, he took one hand off the sword, reached down to pick up the crown, and put it on his head. The result was not something that Dylan had expected. "Our leader has been found!" the creature began yelling as he pranced excitedly around the platform, kicking bones and swinging the book around. His voice carried out over the valley. At first, only those nearest the platform heard, their dancing stopping as the words sunk in. Hurried glances and whispers soon spread, and the creatures began to abandon their fires and head for the platform. "He shall come to us from up high," the creature said as he danced, his hands covered in blood, to claim the sword and crown. And he held up the book to the crowd that had begun to form, swelling each second. Evil, pointy grins spread. "The prophecy has come true," some said. "Our leader has been found," others yelled to those behind. "Now we can conquer this land," they all began to chant. The creature turned to Dylan. "Would you mind sitting in the chair right there?" it asked. "We have a busy night ahead of us." So those are the first, not the first 3 chapters. Those are 3 chapters from the book. The next book is called Forget-Me-Not, and it takes place about 6 weeks after the first one is finished. It has to do with Gertrude for basically losing her memory right when she's about to tell Rebecca how to lift the curse. So again, the series is really going to do a lot about playing the 2 characters off each other, Dylan and Rebecca. The dragon army is in direct conflict with the rest of the land that Rebecca's going to represent, but Rebecca and Dylan are obviously twins, so they share this bond. So there's going to be a lot of this discovery about who they are as individuals, and then what their duty is to each other and to the jobs they have taken on. So again, this is Gertrude's Broken Wand. It's the first book in the Marmalade series. You can get a free preview on Scribd right now or on the Dime Novel Publishing website. We should have it in Apple's iBookstore as well soon, and then October 15th, you'll be able to get an ebook at any of the leading ebook retailers, or even this wonderful print copy from Amazon.com.